Hello, everyone. We'll get started now. My name is Charlie Berger. I'm the Senior Director of Product Management for Oracle for the Machine Learning. I will be your host today. We have a great lineup today. I'm going to go through a few logistics before we get introduce our speaker and such. Um, Actually, I introduced the speaker right now. Actually, I'm reading the script here. So we're gonna have a great speaker today. We have a very great speaker. We have Maria Colgan, Distinguished Product Manager, speaking about the future is data driven. Hello, Maria.
Hey, Charlie.
Yeah. And after we have Maria speak for about 35 minutes or so, we'll have a brief Q&A. And I just want to go through a few housekeeping logistic things for everyone. And then we'll get on with Maria's great presentation. Our next TechCast is scheduled for August 20th. We have Gary Chrissy, who's I think an Oracle Ace director, speaking about modernizing intercompany billing using Hyperledger Fabric Distributed Ledger. Thank you for sharing this, showing that. That's great. The previous TechCast was with Melly and company, Melly and Gautam, and they did graph analytics, an example of detecting fraud in the financial industry, and that was great. So those things like this one will be recorded. We post them. We dual post them. We record the Zoom recordings and post that on the same website, and then we also post them on YouTube on the Analytics and Data Oracle user community YouTube channel. The speaker's contact information is on the presentation, and you can follow up with her directly afterwards, as you will also get a copy of her PDF presentation. Before we switch over to Maria, I also wanted to say that we encourage everyone to come onto the stage and share their talents and their knowledge. Everyone has some sort of knowledge, expertise, tips and tricks to share, and we encourage them all to submit TechCast abstract proposals. You can do so at the TechCast website, and the subcommittee will review them, select the best, and work with you to slot you into a future TechCast schedule. With that, I am going to turn it over to Maria, and take it away, Maria. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Charlie. So, in this morning's session, what I'm going to cover is all about the future being data driven. And really, what does that mean? And it means that in order to stay competitive, businesses really need to understand their customers and anticipate their customers' needs and deliver on those needs. Now, that's a very hefty goal and a big task to do. So, how do you do that? Well, for enterprises to become data driven and to stay competitive, they're going to take advantage of data driven applications that are built using data driven paradigms. And in this session, what I want to do is explain to you how we can simplify that approach and make businesses not only maintain their competitiveness, but perhaps be able to grow their market and stuff. Great. So what are data-driven apps? Well, data-driven apps are applications that are going to use a variety of different types of data. We're no longer just doing standard relational data. We're looking to get data from multiple different sources. So things like spatial data, it may be JSON documents, it could be IoT sensor data that's coming in, and it's going to come from a variety of different sources, and we need to be able to create value from that data. And we're going to create that value using a variety of techniques. So for example, we may use machine learning to do product recommendations to customers in real time, or fraud detection. We may want to use graph to identify influencers so that we know who to target with a particular campaign. We also want to be able to search through large catalogs or large document sets using text search and things like that. So that's what a data-driven app is. And all of these new algorithms add tremendous value to these applications because we're able to generate all this additional value from this data in very different ways. But there is a mild downside to this, because with all of these new algorithms and the new products we need or new databases we need to be able to do this, we can add a fair amount of complexity, and we can also unintentionally fragment our data into separate systems or silos, which can be a tremendous problem when it comes to actually deploying and managing these types of applications in our environments. Now, when you're building these new data-driven applications, we're going to be using a whole new set of development paradigms. So things like microservices and events to be able to manage or process data or share data between these different microservices. And if we're building online applications, chances are it's going to be a SaaS application where we'll have multi-tenant environments for our customers. We also need to think globally. These applications are not being just written for one small store or whatever. We're doing things that are global these days. And so the data needs to be distributed. And it is a 24/7 world, and we can't get away from that. So any kind of changes or improvements or enhancements to these applications need to happen with continuous innovation and continuous delivery. We need to be able to get those changes out fast. We also may be building these applications using a low-code development environment, and in order to prototype quickly and get the data out there. So all of these new development paradigms greatly simplify the development of these applications, which is fantastic. However, there is a downside. They can potentially complicate the data architecture when it comes to deploying these apps and keeping them alive. And the more data we add to this, the greater the complexity may be, especially in terms of management. So don't panic, we're going to help you make it much simpler to do this. We're going to do that by providing you synergistic data paradigms for each of these development paradigms. In other words, we'll give you features and functionality inside the Oracle database that'll allow you to take advantage of each of those new development paradigms we've just talked about, but by using these synergistic data paradigms inside in the database. And we're going to do the same thing for each of those new data types that we talked about and the use cases. So again, building it into the core database, making it much simpler for you to be able to take advantage of all of these new techniques and data types, but without the complexity of having to manage tons of different products. And as I said, we're going to eliminate that data fragmentation by giving you a single converged database. So without further ado, let's jump in and talk a little bit in more detail about how we're going to be able to help you create this value faster with these new development paradigms that we've been talking about. And as I said, the modern development paradigms, they have the potential to complicate your data architecture or complicate your production environments. But as I said, we will give you a synergistic data paradigm for each one of them. In other words, we'll map a particular feature or functionality within the Oracle database to each of those development paradigms, allowing you to be able to do it much more directly and simply than the way you would do it using some of the off-the-shelf products that are aimed at these particular development paradigms. So let's start with probably the most popular development paradigm at the moment, microservices, where you take a monolithic application, you divide it up into separate modules or components or services, and you're able to develop each one in isolation. And that's fantastic because it really improves the speed and agility of the development for each of those modules. The problem is, if you were to put each of the modules into a separate physical database, you end up with a massive amount of databases to manage and monitor and keep highly available and backup and all that good stuff. So Oracle loves the idea of the microservices. We love the agility that comes with it, but we want to simplify the implementation for you. And we do that by allowing you to put each microservice in its own pluggable database. And the pluggable databases give you the full isolation that the microservices architecture is good for. So each service is completely isolated from the others. You can evolve the schema, you can change things without impacting the other services. But by putting each of the microservices in its own pluggable database, then we can put those into one or more physical databases. So we can either co-locate them all in one physical database, or we can do it over a small number of physical databases, and that way simplify the management greatly. So in the example I'm showing here, I have 4 microservices that are being deployed via Kubernetes, and each one has their own separate database, just as the microservices philosophy would tell you, but each of those are pluggable databases, and so they are logically separate, but they're stored in just 2 physical databases in this example, making microservices very, very simple and easy to manage. Now, when you go with the microservice architecture, you need to communicate between these services. And we often do that using events-based architecture, where we are sending and receiving events from different services that need to be processed. And again, this can also get quite complicated, but we want to make sure that we keep it as simple as possible. And so Oracle has implemented event streaming to and from Kafka, which is the most commonly used event-based architecture. And we're able to do this because Golden Gate can replicate streaming data changes directly into Kafka. So as we're making changes, we can stream them directly into Kafka, and we can also now queue events from Kafka or bring events from Kafka into the Oracle database, which is fantastic. And inside the Oracle database itself, even if you're not using Kafka today, you can take advantage of Oracle's advanced queuing. It's technology that's been in the Oracle database for more than 15 years now. And with that queuing technology, you get full ACID transaction support, as well as all the power of SQL queries on top of that or over your events. And you can, if you want to use both of these together, Oracle has a connector that will stream events to and from Kafka from Oracle Advanced Queuing or from our database queues. So we're going to make it incredibly easy for you to be able to do this event-based architecture using Oracle database. Now, another key aspect to simplifying the development side of these applications is, of course, to kind of have an abstraction layer above the database, above all your data sources, really, not just databases, and allow the application to access the data further down the stack via APIs. And Oracle makes that incredibly easy because we've got the ability to create REST APIs on top of SQL or stored procedures inside the Oracle database. We call it ORDs, but what it is you can basically make any SQL statement or any stored procedure call into a REST endpoint or a REST API. So the application doesn't need to know anything about your database. Your developers don't even need to be expert SQL writers or coders. In fact, you could have a specific team that's going to make sure that all of the queries that the applications need, that it perform fantastically, because you're going to create REST endpoints and the developers are simply going to call those REST endpoints to get the data that they want. So it will simplify and standardize your data access by taking advantage of these REST endpoints that you can create inside the database. And remember, it's not just standard SQL. It could be Java or PL SQL stored procedures that you are exposing through these REST endpoints. And so you can actually do quite a bit of functionality and processing inside in those procedures inside the Oracle database. And so that will actually avoid multiple round trips potentially to and from the database in order to process some kind of business logic. You can put all of that inside the stored procedure and get the benefit in a single round trip to the database. So just the way we would use JavaScript in a browser to avoid network round trips, you can use our REST capabilities inside the Oracle database to do exactly the same thing. Now, one of the things when you are building these new modern applications is the fact that chances are you're going to need a multi-tenant or SaaS style environment. It's becoming more and more popular to do this, and Oracle makes it far easier to implement a SaaS architecture if you take advantage of our multi-tenant architecture. Why? Because each tenant is going to get its own separate pluggable database. And that way you can avoid having to put any code into the application to separate or secure the tenants from one another, because the application can be written completely transparent to the fact that it's a multi-tenant environment, because each tenant or each version of the app will point to just a single database. But because you can manage many pluggable databases as one database, it's actually very, very easy to implement and maintain. And because they're a pluggable database, or each tenant is a pluggable database, you're going to get all of the advantages of a multi-tenant database. So for example, we can very quickly clone a tenant. So if a tenant wanted to upgrade, or a tenant wanted to create a dev or test environment, they can instantly do that by taking advantage of our multi-tenant cloning capabilities. Or as I said, if you want to move them around because you're looking to get better utilization of your hardware, you can actually unplug a tenant and plug them in somewhere else, or simply clone them somewhere else so that you can get that advantage.
Hey Maria, question if you want. There's a question that came in. I wondered if it's right about where you are in slides. Can I ask you the question now? You take a live
Yeah,
question?
let's do it.
All right, so here it is. It says, in terms of pricing for Golden Gate event processing on Kafka for Oracle Pluggable Database, will the Golden Gate for Oracle and Big Data both be required, or only Golden Gate for Oracle? Do you know that answer?
Oh goodness. I don't know it, so let me start with that. But I'm going to guess you're going to need Golden Gate. But I bear with us. I will try and find that out, and we can hopefully post it somewhere, perhaps in the community, Charlie,
Yeah, yeah,
when we're done.
yeah. Okay. If anybody
Okay.
else knows the answer, they can share it with us. And I
Yeah.
thought it was kind of a special question. All right, thanks.
Okay. No worries. So as I said, you are going to use our multi-tenant architecture to deliver your SaaS applications, because not only is it going to simplify the management once this goes production, but it also is going to simplify the application, because you're not going to need to put security code that can be kind of complex and error prone into the application to prevent the tenants from seeing one another. That's all going to happen automatically for you, given the architecture, and the database security for each tenant will be taken care of automatically for you. And again, tenants can use all the standard analytical style tools to be able to connect to their application, because they are isolated into their own PDB. It is just a database after all. So they can use any of the standard BI tools, be the Oracle or third party, to be able to access the data. And don't just take my word for it. We have tons of enterprise applications that are using this approach today, including our own NetSuite, Fusion applications, Taleo. They have all adopted this architecture by utilizing Oracle multi-tenant to take away the complexity that you would normally have in a SaaS app. Now, another thing that is incredibly powerful and incredibly useful for your business is to be able to develop applications using low-code development environments. And the reason for this is they allow you to be able to innovate very, very quickly and get a prototype up and going, so that your end users can see what it might look like and then can help iterate in the development of those new apps. And Oracle's got you covered for this too. We have Oracle Apex, which is our low-code development environment. But what's different about our approach to others, it is browser-based, just like a lot of the other ones, but it's got a deep integration with the Oracle database. And so that eliminates a lot of the complexity that would normally have to be done by the developers, because you don't need to worry about mid-tiers or connection management or state management or trying to map application data types to database data types. Apex has all of that automatically covered for you. Because it's built into the Oracle database, it takes care of all of those mappings, does all of it automatically for you. And of course, it will still allow you to create those enterprise apps in mere hours or minutes versus days or weeks. And because you can quickly show the end user what it's going to look like, you can iterate and evolve that application really, really quickly based on what your business needs. Now, I mentioned earlier on that these data-driven applications tend to be global, or at least on a larger scale than what we would traditionally build an application for. And an awful lot of this is driven by data sovereignty, as well as the ability to support massive scale. And of course, sharding is really the key to that. If you ask anybody, or you Google and say, I need to support massive scale or different geographies, you're going to get sharding as the answer. And again, Oracle has you covered there. Now, if you're not familiar with the sharding concept, what it is you take a large monolithic database and you break it up into separate physical pieces, so separate shards. And each shard is its own separate Oracle database running on its own separate hardware. So if you needed the data for EMEA or Europe to be residing in a European country, that's no problem. You create your European shard, your Oracle database on its hardware. But with sharding, you can still get a universal view of that data. So traditionally, with sharded databases, your application queries need to have the shard key as a where clause predicate in them. And that's still true with Oracle sharding, but we do give you the ability to also run queries across all of the shards to get that global view of the data as well, which is quite unique. And what else is unique is the fact that you don't have to give up any of the benefits you get from a mature SQL database like Oracle if you need a sharded architecture, because you're getting the best of both worlds here. the Oracle database in a highly available and sharded architecture. Now, let's face it, it is a 24/7 world. If we are looking to support customers all over the world, we don't have the luxury of having a window where we can actually take the system down to do all of this lovely maintenance and evolve or the application or introduce new modules. It all has to be done while the application stays open for business. So that's very easily done in the Oracle database because we offer you a number of different techniques to be able to support that type of continuous delivery. So you can take advantage of our edition-based redefinition, which will allow you to have multiple versions of your application code active on the database, allowing you to slowly evolve customers over to the new version as you go. We also, of course, can do all the table maintenance operations, everything including, partitioning a non-partition table, rebuilding indexes, all of that good stuff now happens completely online. Oracle's put a huge effort in over the last 3 releases to ensure that all of the maintenance activity that we would normally do on a schema can now be done fully online while the application stays open for business. And more, we're extracting the schema definition out of the database, the kind of more traditional third normal form or star schemas, by taking advantage of JSON documents. And I'll talk a lot more about this later on, but because we've got those documents available inside the Oracle database, you can manipulate or change your schema by simply updating or inserting new JSON documents. And again, all of this is tried and trusted technology because we're using it ourselves in our own application teams. So eBiz and Fusion applications inside of Oracle, but also Salesforce, the biggest online application vendor today, they're also taking advantage of these technologies in order to be able to do this continuous delivery. Oh, okay, so we've talked a lot about the development paradigms that are used to create these applications, but I want to spend a little bit of time talking about how you can create value from the data that's stored in these applications in new ways. And I don't want you to be afraid of adopting these new technologies because they can be incredibly beneficial for the business, especially when you realize you don't have to deploy new technologies or new databases in order to be able to do it. And I guess probably the hottest thing today when people are talking about being able to create value in different ways is they're talking about using machine learning. And Oracle makes it incredibly simple for your applications to be able to take advantage of machine learning because we've got over 30 in-database parallel machine learning algorithms built in. So this will allow you to do things like real-time product recommendations to your customers, fraud detection, even sentiment analysis. What are people thinking about or talking about with Oracle? And of course, you can augment or add to this by doing callouts to Python and R machine learning algorithms as well from the Oracle database. Now, you might be thinking, oh, hang on a second, Maria, now you're just trying to sell me more Oracle options or more Oracle licenses. And I've got great news. Yes, previously machine learning was an additional option to the Oracle database, but it's now free in all database editions. So you can actually be able to take full advantage of this regardless of which version of the Oracle database or which edition of the Oracle database you're using, and be able to get this extra value with machine learning. And if you're wondering what kind of algorithms we've got, I'm certainly not the expert in this. Charlie, who's on the call with me, is. But let me just tell you, we have all sorts of machine learning algorithms in the database, whether it's classification, which I'm going to show you an example of now, or clustering, time series, text analysis, whatever it is you need, Oracle has most likely an algorithm in the database for you. So as I promised, here's a quick example of just how simple it is. And folks, if I can do this, you can definitely do this. First, I need to build and train my machine learning model inside of the Oracle database. And what I'm trying to do here is determine what customers would buy travel insurance. And so I'm going to use historical data to build and train my model to make sure that it's able to quickly identify for me which customers, given certain criteria, would buy that travel insurance. Once I've got my model built, I can then apply it to predict which customers are likely to buy with some criteria. So it's super simple. You see there's just a simple select from Joule where I'm asking it to predict the probability that customers who have a certain amount of money in their bank account are 37 years old and are married and have been on 2 previous cruises, what's the probability they would buy my travel insurance? And that way I'll be able to narrow it down and target the exact audience of customers to be able to send promotions or reminders that they may want to buy travel insurance. Now, the other key to be able to create value and to predict what your customers' needs are going to be is to be able to run real-time analytics against the latest data in our system. So be able to run analytics right next to our transaction processing system rather than waiting for the data to go downstream to a data warehouse. And Oracle makes that incredibly easy by allowing you to have data in memory in both the traditional row format and a highly optimized columnar format for analytics. And that'll allow us to run those analytics right there on the transaction processing system and greatly improve the performance of them by accessing the data in a parallel way in this columnar format. And what's the beauty of this is it's completely transparent to the application. So whether you run it on a data warehouse or you run it on a transaction processing system, your SQL remains exactly the same, but we'll automatically determine that's an analytical style query and direct it to the columnar format so we can get that performance boost for it, which is really makes real-time analytics super simple. Now, graph analytics is an area that's starting to heat up, and a lot of people are interested in this because it's incredibly useful if I'm trying to identify influencers or communities or get a 360-degree view of my customer. Graph analytics is a great way to do that. And what you may not realize is that Oracle has over 50 in-memory parallel analytic graph functions inside in the Oracle database. And again, this was a previously priced option. It's now completely free in all the Oracle database editions, making graph analytics super easy for you. And as I said, just like machine learning, there are a ton of different types of graph analytic algorithms that you can take advantage of. Everything from ranking and walking through the graph, pathfinding, all of that is available to you. And we have hundreds of enterprise customers using this technology today. And we also have an open source graph query language that you may not be aware of. We call it PGQL, and it allows you to specify graph patterns which are matched against vertices or edges inside in a graph. And so you'll see there the SQL at the lower left-hand side of the slide. It looks a little interesting where you see round brackets and square brackets, which indicate nodes and edges in the graph, but it's actually very simple to then adopt this to be able to do graph analytics. So in the simple query you see there, I'm basically saying I want to find out all of the outgoing edges and all of the people that are indirectly linked to Barack Obama. So it's a great way to very easily establish that community, identify those influencers, and be able to target them with specific marketing offers because they will influence that big community. Now, as I said earlier on, one of the easiest ways to manipulate your schema and to continuously change a schema is by simply storing the information in JSON or XML documents. And Oracle's going to make that incredibly easy for you because we're going to allow you to store and manipulate the schema in the application and the database in exactly the same way by storing it all in JSON documents. And what's great about Oracle is it's not just a document store. You can mix relational, spatial, and IoT sensor data in with your JSON data and be able to run queries across all of it very easily. You can also index your JSON elements to make it very fast to be able to do transaction processing style queries on top of those. And because of course it's built into the Oracle database, you'll have full ACID compliance and of course the ability to access and analyze all of that data using things like parallel execution, machine learning, etc. So making it very easy to use document data. So I want to show you a quick example of using JSON in the Oracle database. First thing you can do, you're going to create a table. Now, your table doesn't have to just be a JSON document. I mean, it can be, but it doesn't have to be. You can have relational columns in there with the JSON as I do here. So I have a 2-column table that I've created for my menu items. It's got the restaurant name, and then each of the menu items is going to be stored as a JSON document. So you see they're very simple. If you're not familiar with JSON, it's just basically a list of key value pairs inside in these curly brackets. But what's great about the way Oracle does it is that we can use a simple dot notation to access the individual elements inside in that JSON document. So for example, if I want to just pull out the name and the price for my particular menu item, then I'm just going to use Oracle standard dot notation. So table alias, the JSON column name, and then which element inside in the JSON document I'm interested in, making it very, very simple for us to be able to walk through those documents and just pick out. And it's not just in a select list, I can use these in joins or aggregations as well, which is great. And we also, of course, know that if we're going to be storing all of these text or these documents inside in the Oracle database, we want an easy way to be able to search and analyze those text documents. And Oracle makes that incredibly easy because we have built-in search technologies where you can search for keywords or for context or even for patterns. So things like doing a website search or a catalog search, you can do all of that. And it's not just searching existing static documents. You can also perform linguistic analysis either on existing documents or maybe streaming data. So if you're looking for to analyze customers' feedback and whether or not it's positive, negative, or maybe neutral sentiment analysis type work, this is perfect for that because you can do just that, whether it's on static documents or on a stream of data that's coming in. Now, as I said, you can also use it on your existing JSON or XML documents. In fact, you can use the structure of your JSON document to refine or reduce the search. So I'll show you an example of that now. Let's imagine I have a bunch of purchase orders in my database, and each purchase order is a separate JSON document, and they're stored in my purchase orders table in the PO column. So I'm going to create a search index or a text index on those JSON documents. I just need 2 additional keywords from what I would normally do with a create index. I want to create a search index. I give it a name on the purchase orders table, and I say it's going to be on JSON data or for JSON. And then I can write an incredibly simple query that says, I want you to search through all of these JSON documents, all of these purchase orders, and I want you to look in the comment field of those JSON documents, and I'm looking for 2 words. I wanted to say that it was delivered, but I'm also looking to see whether or not the word damaged appears in that comment. And so Oracle go out, use the search index, and instantly return just the JSON documents that have the word delivered and damaged in the comment field. Now, when we are in such a global kind of application, we are probably going to be shipping and moving our data, our products around the world, and we want to be able to track all of that information. And the easiest way to do that, of course, is with spatial data, because it's going to allow us to compute the distance between different places or people or assets, allows us to also analyze our full network, whether that's a transportation network or maybe it's a utilities or telco network. And it also allows us to do all sorts of planning information if we have spatial data. And again, Oracle has built in over 100 spatial operators and functions into the Oracle database. And it's becoming a bit of a common refrain now. Previously priced option, now free in all database editions. And it's incredibly easy to use. And as I said, we have a massive amount of these, over 60 spatial topology functions and procedures, and over 125 spatial network functions. So lots of ways for you to be able to take advantage of this. Here's just a very simple example. I'm always hungry, so it's a common refrain, you know, what restaurant should we order from tonight? This simple example is going to find all the restaurants that are within 5 kilometers of our home. Super easy to do because I'm taking advantage of the within distance built-in function with Oracle. So I know the location of my home and the location of all of the restaurants. And so I can just limit it by saying, I only want to find the restaurants that are within 5 kilometers of my home. Very, very quick, very powerful capability. Now, one of the things that when we're building these apps that we always have to be thinking about is security. And there are lots of cases where we need to be able to audit or in fact protect our data integrity by not allowing it to be tampered with in order to be able to prevent fraud or anybody doing anything shady in the database. And so blockchain has become a very popular way to in fact do that. And Oracle now offers blockchain tables in the upcoming 20C database that's available on the web right now for you to begin beta testing it. And what it's going to allow you to do is create a blockchain table that allows data to be inserted into it, but each of the rows that's inserted is cryptographically chained to the previous row. And that's going to help us prevent any kind of fraud, because not only are we verifying and signing each of these rows as they go into the database, there's no ability to delete or update a row. So that means that once it's in, we know exactly who put it there, when it was put there, and there's no way to tamper with it. So it's going to allow you to integrate the concept of the blockchain architecture without having to introduce complex new features or products. To do that, you'll be able to get that in a standard table with standard SQL and making it fully transactional, so it can be fully ACID compliant, and you'll be able to run analytics against it, but you'll have the security and the knowledge that it can't be tampered with. So let me show you a quick example. Here I'm creating a blockchain table as for my trades, my stock trades. And I can simply insert into that blockchain table, no problem. But if I attempt to do a delete or even an update on that table, it's not possible. I'll actually get an error message that says that operation is not allowed on a blockchain table. And I can then not only do the DML aspect of it to protect it from not being changed, but I can also go in and verify. I can use this new package, DBMS blockchain table, and in there there's a procedure called verify rows that'll verify none of the rows have been tampered with. Now, IoT or streaming data is also another very, very powerful capability we've got in the Oracle database. And we're going to make it very, very simple for you to be able to do this by allowing you to very quickly ingest data into an in-memory buffer and then have us persist it to disk asynchronously or in the background. So as soon as the data hits memory, the controllers return back to the application, allowing it to continue on with its processing, while in the background, Oracle will persist that data to disk. And it's going to be a massive improvement in the performance of ingest of data. Here's a quick example, 25 million inserts a second just on a 2-socket server. And what's great about this is that Oracle not only allows you to quickly ingest the sensor data, but we can use a lot of the built-in analytic capabilities of the Oracle database to be able to process that. Because remember, with an IoT style workload, we're not really interested in the individual values, we're interested in finding a pattern within that database. So how do I do this? How do I make sure that I'm getting this fast streaming? When I create the table, I simply specify something called mem optimized for write as an attribute of that table. And when I insert into it, I'm going to specify a new hint, mem optimized write, to alert Oracle that when I'm doing this insert, I want you to use those in-memory buffers and persist it to disk later on in the background. Don't make me wait for you to persist it to disk before you return the control to the application. And then as soon as that data is in and persisted, I can use the built-in analytical functions to find differences, which is really what I'm after, or patterns in that data. Now, we've talked an awful lot of different technologies and capabilities and how they can offer value or create value very quickly to your business. But Oracle's not the only vendor that's talking about this, and there are multiple approaches to this. And so what I want to talk a little bit about just before we wrap up is this notion of a converged product or a converged database. And this is not new. It's not like the notion of a converged product isn't really a new concept. If you think about your smartphone that you most likely have in your pocket or on the desk next to you today, It does a whole bunch of things that used to be separate products. It takes photographs. It allows you to make phone calls, send messages, video stream. It allows you to do all of these things that are now features of that smartphone that were originally separate products. And the same is true for the Oracle Converged database. It allows you to be able to utilize all different types of data, all different types of use cases that used to require separate databases, now in one converged database, making it inherently simpler for you to be able to do all the things you might want to do, like personalization of recommendations for a customer, fraud detection, whatever it may be. Now, as I said, we're not the only people that are recommending data-driven applications and are encouraging users to do that, but we are the only one that are recommending doing it using a single converged database. A lot of the other vendors are looking for you to use niche or one-off products for all of these different types of use cases, different types of data, which can, as I said, make the development nice and easy, but can really complex the implementation and the management of those systems. So we think it's going to be dramatically simpler to both develop and to deploy data-driven applications using a single converged database, rather than having multiple fragmented databases that distribute both the execution and require a lot of data movement in order to be able to maintain that whole working environment. And if you go with that approach where you've got a different database for every workload that or data type that you've got, it's going to be much more difficult to manage, maintain, back up, and keep them highly available, because you're going to need people with different skill sets for all of those disciplines. So we think Oracle can make it very simple for you to be able to build data-driven applications and offer this great value to the business by allowing them to get a really good view of their customers, understand their customers' needs, and deliver on those needs. And we're going to do that by offering you synergistic data paradigms for each of those modern development paradigms that we talked about, and native support inside in the core database for all of the different data types and the different algorithms that you may want to use. And we do that by offering you one converged database for all your data. It doesn't have to be one monolithic database. It could be lots of different PDBs. It could be several container databases with PDBs inside of those. But by having that single platform where you build all your applications and deploy them, it's going to make it far simpler to both maintain your skill set across your employees, and also in terms of managing, deploying, and making those systems highly available. So with that, I know I've taken way more time than Charlie promised you, but we can open it up for Q&A. And just a quick reminder of the next session that's coming up on August 20th with Gary.
Maria, that is absolutely excellent, and you closed on just the slide I was hoping for, so thank you so much. Saves me talking here. Hey, I got a question here from Kenny in Kansas. Okay, he is asking, when is 20C going to be available?
So stay tuned. It is available right now on the cloud for beta testing. So it is available there for you to try it out. Remember, you can take advantage of our always free tier to be able to do that. So it doesn't cost you anything. But there will be announcements about the upcoming availability of 20C on-prem and so on later on. I believe, I don't think I'm supposed to say the exact time frame, but let's say in the next couple of months, you'll hear from us on that.
Okay, here's another question. Do you have to have, everything's free, the spatial and graph and machine learning, do you have to have 18C to do that? What if you have an older release? Can you still go back and use those if you have an older version?
My understanding it's from 18C onwards, Charlie, but correct me if I'm wrong.
I think you're wrong. now that you say that, I guess I don't know. I have to go back and check that. It's in an announcement, guys. Just Google that. Willie Hardy did an announcement, and it's in there. So
I don't know if we backported it, but we certainly announced it with 18C. So
yeah, that was a license. Yeah, it's in 18C. I guess I just Google Oracle machine learning Willie Hardy, no license required, and you'll get there. There's been a few different questions about multi-language for text. I already answered those, put a few links in a few different things here. There's one question that I didn't quite understand. He says, what are the CI/CD tools Oracle offers on premise and on the cloud? And I was saying, well, what are you calling CI/CD? Converged database? I wasn't quite sure his terminology here. Does that make sense?
So CI/CD, I guess they're talking about the edition-based redefinition, being able to take advantage of that, being able to take advantage of all the online operations. So anything that's, core SQL stuff. So rebuild index, partition a table online, any of those kind of maintenance activities that we offer, regardless of whether you're on the cloud or you're on-prem, you have access to all of that. It's just part and parcel of the Oracle database. On-prem, edition-based redefinition is absolutely yours for the using. And on the majority of our database cloud services, edition-based redefinition is also available to you. There were some limitations initially when the Oracle Autonomous Database came out, but I believe those limitations have been lifted, but that would be the only one where I know there was any type of restriction. Otherwise, they're all fully available on all the cloud services and obviously available to you for free on-prem as well.
Okay, here's a question. We have OAC 5.7 and ADW. Is there any other technology needed to utilize machine learning to develop a systematic, sophisticated fraud detection process? I can help you answer that. No, you got everything you need.
I was going to say, yeah, Charlie, you'd be my expert. The person I'd ask that question to is you.
Yeah, on that one, I mean, there's over 30 something algorithms in there. So you have the one class support vector machine, which is what comes to mind for sophisticated fraud, like finding rare events. But you also have clustering. Maria said it before, but if you have the graph data, like who's had 7 degrees of Kevin Bacon away from good guys or bad guys list. You've got the spatial data. You've got all that stuff. So the new thing in 5.7 is from OAC, you can actually we can register a model that, let's say I built in ADW, and you can start scoring it. So Philippe Leon and company has some great demos of that. I'm just using it myself. It's wonderful stuff. So see me offline, charlie.berger at Oracle, if I can help you with that. There's questions about, will the slides be made available? And I think, yes, you're making them available.
Yep,
And
no
we will
problem at
post
all.
them. The recording and the slides and everything, give us 24 or 48 hours to get out there. This is run by a user community, so it's all volunteer based, and we'll get that as soon as we can get that out to you. I'm looking for other questions before we wrap up. I think we're coming in for a close. I did want to say our next TechCast is scheduled for August 20th with Gary Chrissy presenting modernizing intercompany billing using Hyperledger Fabric Distributed Ledger. And mark your calendars for the new, we're not doing the summit physically face-to-face due to the pandemic, so we've been doing these quarterly TechCast days. First day is machine learning, second day I think it's going to be graph, third day is what we're calling Analytics Plus. So more than just pie charts, something else, kind of like the stuff that Maria's been talking about here. And mark your calendars, those are October 13, 14, and 15. And with that, I'd like to thank our most excellent speaker, Maria Colgan. We're delighted to have such a great, distinguished product manager speak on great topics. And I think we'll close it. So thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Charlie.
Take care. Thank you, everyone, for attending.